The United States has brokered a peace agreement between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. But beyond easing tensions, does Washington stand to gain the most? With critical minerals fueling the global tech, energy, and artificial intelligence revolutions, rerouting Congo's resources through Rwanda could reshape global supply chains and geopolitical power. Meanwhile, voices within the international community, including from social watchdogs, are calling for punitive measures against war merchants implicated in human rights abuses throughout the conflict. This is The Conversation. I am Lekon Onobanjo. Let's talk. On June 27, 2025, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda signed a U.S. brokered peace deal in Washington, aiming to end decades of conflict in eastern DRC, where M23 rebels, allegedly backed by Rwanda, have caused thousands of deaths and displaced millions. Supported by Qatar, the agreement seeks to halt hostilities, disarm groups like M23, others, and boost U.S. investments in the DRC's mineral wealth. However, its failure to address M23's war crimes, including executions and forced recruitment, raises doubts about lasting peace. With the U.S. focused on minerals and Rwanda denying rebel support, questions linger. Questions like, can the deal hold? Will there be accountability? What future awaits the Congolese people amid ongoing violence and exploitation? Today, to help us bring clarity to these questions, I'm joined by Claude Gatibuke, who is an author and a Rwandan genocide civil war survivor, and he joins me from Tennessee in the United States of America. Thank you so much, Claude, for joining us. Can you please unmute? We heard you a while ago. And we also have Christopher Isike, who is the Director, African Center for the Study of the U.S., University of Pretoria in South Africa. Thank you so much, Christopher, for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let me start with Christopher. Pending the time Claude is able to have his audio clear for us to have that feedback from him. Now, Amnesty International, Christopher, said that the DR Congo-Rwanda peace deal does not address serious crimes committed in the East. How not so?
Well, they may have a point in terms of the fact that this peace deal, does not, it's not inclusive enough in terms of civil society, being part of the peace deal, and it does not look at accountability per se. It's actually a bold fusion of security, economic, and geopolitical agendas that tends to favor the U.S. in many ways, because by positioning, stability as contingent on critical mineral access, the U.S. is pushing for a resource-backed peace deal that is not really only about the interest of sustainable peace in the region, but tailored to counter U.S. rivals like China and reinforce U.S. influence. So for me, the long-term success really remains dependent on how inclusive implementation would be in terms of, including civil society and their interests, which is one of which is actually enabling accountability, the commitment of the key actors to genuine disarmament. The M13 rebels are saying that they do not recognize this particular peace deal because it didn't really include them. They are pushing for another one that the Qataris, they believe, can do for them, and So for me, basically, it is questionable whether this will hold if it's not as inclusive as it should be, and especially when it sidelines Africa regional frameworks and reinforces Western influence instead.
All right, now, Claude, let me come to you. I mean, you have been in this, you survived the war. Now that a peace deal has been signed, would you say that that agreement only scratches the surface and does not address the fundamental issues between the rebels loyal to Rwanda and the forces also said to be loyal to Kinshasa?
Yes, I would say that it does not scratch the surface, because the basis of what we have is in Congo, we've got massive atrocities. We have an ongoing war and occupation, a war of aggression by U.S. allies, Rwanda and Uganda, who have invaded Congo, not only uh, committed mass atrocities, mass rapes, and I mean, even the UN itself has reports that say that, if taken to court, they'll be found to be guilty of genocide. And here we are talking about a peace deal that doesn't include accountability, actually doesn't even recognize that what is happening in Congo is a war of aggression and invasion from both Rwanda and Uganda into the Congo. There are no provisions for justice, for people getting justice for all of these atrocities that were committed. The people of the Congo are not centered in what is happening. And so when you look at what is happening, it almost seems like Rwanda and, well, Uganda is not even part of this peace deal, but Rwanda is being incentivized and rewarded for invading the Congo by making a peace deal that is supposed to pull them off the hook from accountability. And without accountability, we cannot really talk about lasting peace. Without recognizing the true history of this conflict, and without also recognizing that what we have today, the M23 being basically an extension of Rwanda's military. You have Rwanda's military invading the Congo. Rwanda's military was built from the Ugandan military, which was, started way back in the early 80s. They have a long history since the 80s in Uganda, in Rwanda in the early 90s, and in Congo in the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and now, of not following agreements that were signed. So I also don't trust that even if this whole agreement is completely signed and agreed on, that Rwanda is going to follow the agreement, because we have seen them break agreement after agreement after agreement. This isn't the first one, and unfortunately, it's likely not the last one. The real lasting peace solution for Congo lies in delivering justice for the crimes and atrocities and genocide committed in the Congo.
Cloud, let me stay with you for a while. When you say justice for the victims, how, in what fold, how do we identify the perpetrators of crime against the victims?
It's not difficult. I would say start with the UN mapping exercise report that was published on October 1st, 2010. That report was started out of, I apologize. That report was started out of the discovery of mass graves in Congo. And from there was a whole research that found hundreds of incidents of mass atrocities and horrible atrocities that were committed in the Congo. It's a 600 plus page document with more than 600 major incidents, only major ones, that were committed in the Congo. And it only documents, that's kind of the start. It documents 1993 to 2003. And since then, there has been many other reports that show not only the aggression, the invasions of the Congo, the various groups that are involved in, the various government troops that are included in committing these atrocities, including some of the Congolese military groups, but especially Rwandan and Ugandan troops in the Congo. The support of the M23 right now, where we have satellite evidence showing Rwandan military barracks delivering equipment and sending troops into the M23 camps, troops being caught in battle, the expansion of of not mass graves, but the expansion of military cemeteries. All of these are evidence of who's committed the crimes in the Congo. There's also the witnesses. There are survivors, a lot of survivors in the Congo. I mean, Congo has over 7 million people displaced, and there's been more than 6 million people who have been killed since the invasion of Congo, mostly children under the age of 5. But there are survivors. They can also give testimony, but there is no shortage of reports that show who the perpetrators are, where the crimes are being perpetrated. So there is what justice looks like. It's one, holding accountable, especially the leaders of these atrocities. We have seen in recent times the U.S. Sanctioned General James Kabarebe, who is Paul Kagame, Rwanda's president, Paul Kagame's right-hand man. That's number 2 in power in Rwanda. He was sanctioned. He has been named in reports previously as commanding and providing logistical and material support to the M23, along with 2 other main generals that were previously named, General Jack Nziza and General Charles Kayonga, and other Rwandan generals. All of those have been named. Okay. We also had the 6-day war between Uganda and Rwanda in Kisangani. And so the other part of justice that I would like to land on is reparations for the victims, for the people who have survived. There has to be reparations. And so all of that is what justice looks like. I mean, I can expand on it, but we can go on for days if I started to expand on it.
Of course.
It's really central that perpetrators are held accountable.
All right. Now, Christopher, holding perpetrators of crime to account would mean prosecuting not only the rebels, but their sponsors. I mean, you just listened to Cloud talk about reports of people, names being provided, those who actually sponsored in person, actively, these M23 rebels. But Rwanda has repeatedly said it has never backed this rebel. Isn't this a wild goose chase? Can there be justice?
Look, justice in the DRC is not just only about what the M23 and Rwanda or Uganda is doing there. There are other actors at stake, playing a significant role in perpetuating a lot of these injustices, a lot of these atrocities that Cloud was talking about. And it actually dates back to the origin, not just the origin of the post-colonial Congolese state itself, but this injustice dates back to how Patrice Lumumba, the first true decolonial leader, one of the first, if you count people like Kwame Nkrumah and co as decolonial leaders. The way that Patrice Lumumba was killed, was treated, and what that message meant for African leaders who wanted to really decolonize their countries from the rape of the continents by the colonialists, right? So that would be what justice would look like. Now, the other side of the argument would be people saying that, look, what about the complicity of Congolese in enabling, the rape of their own countries, their connivance with the US and Belgium to take out Patrice Lumumba and perpetuate what essentially has been the bane of this conflict, right? And the injustices that flow from there. And it also then extends to the question of the states, the Congolese state. It has a lot of governance deficits, governance inadequacies. That's not just peculiar to the DRC, but something that is peculiar to Africa as a whole. I've always maintained that we do not have an African state. We do not have a DRC state or a Rwandan state or a Nigerian state, for example. We have states in Africa, states that were never established by the colonialists to be developmental in terms of their purpose. They were exploitation machines that facilitated the exploitation of African resources. And we inherited these state structures. We did not engage in any kind of meaningful social contract negotiations or discussions with citizens for them to buy into this pressure and then create political communities that will be seen as legitimate in the eyes of citizens. That is the real fundamental injustice of the state system in Africa broadly, and in this specific case of Rwanda, because you can also begin to talk about the state weaknesses and failures that has enabled the M23 forces to break agreements, or that led to the birth of the Congolese militias, the FDLR, that Rwanda is so afraid of would cause another genocide there, right? So these are the issues that we also need to look at if we want to deal with it fundamentally, rather than begin to only isolate or periodize these injustices and think that somehow, even if there's accountability today, it will solve the fundamental problem of state failure, state weakness, which comes from the absence of a social contract between citizens and states. And this also applies to Rwanda, by the way.
So, Christopher, are you saying that Congo itself is complicit or culpable of the situations, the unfortunate events that has befallen it? Is that what you're saying, in essence?
Oh, absolutely. It has. Yes, that's what I'm saying, in essence. You must ask questions around why a people of over 100 million are being terrorized by a country of 11 million people. This is a question that we must really ask ourselves as well. What have been the failures within the Congolese state itself? Whether it's governance failures, whether it's culpability, what are the reasons for those culpability? The governance question in the DRC itself needs to be looked into, whereby some sections of its citizens feel that they do not belong, they are not recognized or accepted by the state, and have interests that go beyond the geographies of the state, which many of them see as illegitimate in any case, because of the absence of the state in their lives. And I'm saying this broadly because it's something that applies to most so-called states in Africa. But it is something that we should also not discountenance in this specific case of the DRC and Rwandan conflict. That's the point I'm trying to make.
All right, so Cloud, do you agree that failure in governance, what has happened in history, complicity on the part of Congolese people, so to speak, actually fueled or is part of the reason why people in Congo have gone through decades of killings, of violence, and all the unfortunate situations that has befallen them? Do you agree?
I would push back on saying Congo or Congolese people in general, because the Congolese people have been very resilient. And the reason why it was even really difficult for Rwanda to take over the town of Goma is because of the local Congolese resistance, the group known as the Wazalendos. However, I do agree that the Congolese elite have been complicit in the state of Congo today. When it comes to what's happening in the Congo, there is internal issues, which for the most part are mostly the Congolese elite betraying the people. And then you have the regional issues, which is neighbors invading the Congo and occupying the Congo. And then you have global, because Rwanda and Uganda are two of the poorest countries in the world. They cannot afford the weapons that they use to invade the Congo and loot and plunder resources out of the Congo if it wasn't for the support of the US, the UK, the European Union, and a lot of the Western puppet masters who run Kagame and Museveni. Now, the point that is being made that I also agree with when it comes to the leadership and state leadership, it's not just a Congolese thing. As Christopher just said, even in Rwanda, it's an issue. Right now, as we speak, the opposition leader, Victoire Ingabire, has been arrested for there are no charges. There's no reason for her to be in prison. And this is a woman that's been in prison for over 8 years, previously for just challenging Paul Kagame in an election. So the issues of governance, the internal issues remain. I do think, though, that a state being under siege is still, or even having incompetent or terrible elites does not justify the invasion. Lastly, I would push back on saying that just because Congo has a much larger population than Rwanda, the Congo should be able to resist and beat Rwandans, because this isn't like a fist fight. This is about weapons and sponsorship and resources and who is behind who's committing the violence. I mean, I'll give you the example of South Africa. You have the white population, the Afrikaners, who created the apartheid, or who ran the apartheid system, and they are a very small minority in a country of millions of South Africans. And so it's about having the power and having the backing, so much so than it is about the numbers of the people. I hear this a lot. People talk about how can a small country the size of Rwanda invade the Congo with 100 million people. I think we also have to look at who's actually involved, and that's why it's important to recognize the internal issues of the Congo, the regional issues, and also the global issues. This is a global fight. Everybody wants a piece of the Congo because of the resources. The reason why there is conflict in Congo is because of access to resources that are being used in the Green Revolution today, that were part of the tech revolution and have been that are used in so many various industries. And so that's the important part of it, is to understand that this is global.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. Everybody wants a piece of the Congo. Let me just quickly bring in Nixon Katembo, who is an analyst at Great Lake and East Africa. Okay, so I just understand that we just lost connection with him. It would have been nice to have him tell us what he feels as regards what's been happening in the Congo. But then, let's move on now, Christopher. Now, we've not really gotten concrete answer, evidence on hand as to this recurring question: who has been sponsoring and backing the operations of the M23 rebels? Now, one would also ask the questions, even if the facts are made available, who takes these rebels and their sponsors to court? Which court? Is it the ICC? Who is going to make these people account for the lives that they've taken?
Okay, before I answer you, I just needed to make a clarification on what I said about the population sizes of both countries. It wasn't just the simplicity of asking why would a small country be able to invade a bigger country geographically and in terms of population. That's not the simplistic aspect I was referring to. I was referring to the fact that if governance and states were properly organized, there is no way that that would happen. It would take. I mean, you can use the example of a small country like Israel with the backing of America attacking Iran, or the same Muslim population like the DRC. But the point is also that if the war in Israel, for example, had continued, the Iranian war had continued beyond when it stopped, Israel would have been badly damaged, even though that Iran was initially because of the early surprise strike. So the point is about governance, the failure of governance within that makes that enables corruption, that makes it easy for the country, because of the lack of organization, to be able to fend off or even deter aggression from poorer, smaller neighbors, like you said. And I agree with him that a lot of the conflict is largely funded from the outside. So I just wanted to make that that point. Now, in terms of the agreement itself, I think that if you compare this particular one with the previous one, for me, the major advantage that this conflict, I mean, this peace process has over the others, is the enforcement mechanism. The fact that previous agreements are dependent on the goodwill of the various actors to try and act right. But in this case, there are clear enforcement mechanisms that gives power back to the state. So if, for example, the Rwanda, as part of the terms of this agreement, is that Rwanda will not support. We withdraw its support from the M23, even though they've denied their support of the M23. Everyone in the world knows, that Rwanda actually backs them, right? So in this agreement, Rwanda agrees to withdraw support. The DRC also agrees to withdraw support from the FDLR, and that these two states will become key actors in making this happen. That is different from previous peace agreements where even these two belligerents, the M23 and FDLR, have been part of the peace process, but have broken those peace deals unilaterally sometimes. But now, with the two states agreeing to take over, come back into the fray as actors, it may enable stability in many ways, if they're able to end their proxy support for this rebel movement. So I would say that this is a big difference between what we've seen between this particular agreement and previous peace agreements that we've had in the past.
Okay. Well, Christopher is sharing some optimism there, but then Cloud. Now, the new accord requires Rwanda and the DRC to cease hostilities, respect each other's territorial integrity, and halt all forms of violence in that particular area. But then we're still hearing cases of clashes between the M23 and the government militia. Is this deal something that we can, hang on, or is it fragile?
I'm not as optimistic as Christopher on this because, again, this is the M23, Rwanda's government. They have a history going back almost 50 years, almost to 1980, 1981, where they've not followed peace deals that they've signed. And, when somebody shows you who they are, you believe them. And what we've seen is they have given so many data points for us to believe that they're not going to, just on the basis of fact, to lead to the conclusion that they would not follow this one either. The second thing that I would add to that, besides that long history of not following the peace agreement, is you have on this past Saturday, I think it was Saturday or maybe Friday, it was Friday, Paul Kagame saying that they basically hinting at not leaving the Congo when he met the media. And what he basically was saying was, if certain things don't happen, they are not removing their troops out of the Congo. And this peace agreement, supposedly in 90 days, they're supposed to have removed their troops from Congo. I also have reports from the ground saying that there are actually troop movements from Rwanda into the Congo. These are from people who are involved. And so I've seen this before. We have seen this before. We've seen peace agreements. We've seen ceasefires. We've seen all of this happen before. And then what happens afterwards is it's broken. And there's always different ways that they do it to break the peace, and the ceasefire. I just think this is really fragile. Until there is a time when there is actually like enforcement mechanisms that say, if you are not going to follow this peace deal, you're going to be isolated. We're going to stop trade with you. We're going to close your borders, or we're not close your borders, but we're not going to trade with you. We're going to have you boycotted. You're not going to receive aid anymore. And all of these things, when there is consequences, then there is at least some type of enforcement. in this deal, there's no documentation of what will happen if anybody doesn't actually follow the this agreement, other than this is the master document for the peace deal. So it's a peace deal on paper, and again, without justice, the justice is a foundation. Without justice, I'm very doubt that this will be a solution for lasting peace.
Okay, so
it may be a quick reprieve, but not a lasting peace.
all right, so
solution.
that actually brings in doubt, or puts in doubt, the involvement or the willingness of all parties involved, both the Kinshasa government, the Rwandan government, the M23 rebels, if all parties are actually willing to put an end to the killings and the violence in the East. But then let's quickly go on a break and return. We're still going to talk more about this. I'd like to let you know that we have our third guest, Nixon Katembo, who would also be joining us and be sharing his perspective with us during the course of the show. We'll go on a break. We'll be back in a bit. Despite Rwanda's denials of backing the M23 rebels and fueling the DRC violence, UN experts estimate that up to about 7,000 Rwandan troops support M23, complicating the peace process as the group remains outside the agreement and continues clashes with pro-government militias, according to reports. Now, as Congolese communities express apprehension about the deal's implications, the challenge lies on balancing geopolitical interests with the urgent need for security, accountability, and equitable development. But who will take up that challenge? And that is why we've been engaging our guests on the show, Claude Gatebuke, who is an author and Rwandan genocide civil war survivor, and of course, Christopher Isike, who is the director, African Center for the Study of the U.S. And of course, I'm glad to let you know that Nixon Katembo, an analyst at Great Lake and East Africa, also joins me from Johannesburg, South Africa, to equally shed light on this. Gentlemen, thank you so much for staying with us on this discourse. Now, I'm going to quickly come to Nixon to get his own response to this. Now, the M23 rebel has said that it is not part of any negotiation or any deal that Rwanda has entered into with the DRC. Now, having that kind of statement come out, isn't it troubling for you, and the fact that we might not see this peace deal eventually come through, most especially as it affects the Congolese people?
One have to look at the historical context in which, I don't know, Sister John late, and I don't know whether my interlocutor have touched on this, but you have to understand that historically there has been nature of these negotiations that involved leaders in the Great Lakes region, particularly Yoweri Museveni and Kagame in this particular context, with the various orders that they have driven in the region. Well, on the other hand, they negotiate, while on the other hand, they are pushing for war. And this M23 quagmire is no different from what we've witnessed in the region. However, from the geopolitical context, you have to look at this is a deal that was done hurriedly in the context of what is happening at a global level at the moment, with the United States trying by all means to have a peace deal done and therefore access to the mineral resources of the DRC. But if you look critically for the United States itself, you see that Masad Boulos, who is an advisor to Donald Trump, is the one driving this particular deal. Instead of policymakers driven by the State Department, one would have assumed that the person in the State Department in charge of African desk would be the one driving the diplomatic approach to these particular issues if it engaged the whole Trump administration. And that poses a problem at a policy level, because an incoming administration, should Trump leave office, they might even disassociate from this particular deal. I'm not saying that they are going to do, but if we look at it as an interest level that involve a particular cabal within the Trump administration, without evolving United States foreign policy as a whole. That is another challenge. Now, coming to the M23 and their denial, it was expected because one would have assumed that the M23 were at the table in the first place in negotiating a peace agreement, whether it's for mineral deal, as it were in Doha or in Nairobi, or the subsequent engagement that the rebels should have engaged in with the Congolese government. Remember, from the onset, the Rwandan government said that it had nothing to do with the Congolese problem, and therefore those are issues for the Congolese. Now, it is so surprising that the Rwandan government is negotiating this deal with the Congolese government together with the United States, and we know behind the scenes is American multinational companies using this and vested interests who have a deal with Kigali to access the mineral resources of the Congo. And therefore, in my view, the deal will not stand.
Okay, let me come to Cloud. Now, this would mean disarmament and retreat of the M23 rebels, including the Rwandan troops set to be providing them support, is still far from happening, right?
Supposedly, but I think, Nixon missed a part of the show, but he actually caught up on some of what I had said earlier. The Museveni and Kagame have this history. That's why I kept referring back to the early 80s of not following these agreements. The other thing that he hit on is the U.S. is in a rush to get access to the minerals. This isn't really about peace for the Congolese. It's about access to the minerals. And so the other part is the U.S. has not been a reliable partner even in just like mediating peace deals. I mean, in recent times, we saw where there was like negotiations with Iran, and then Israel bombed them in a surprise attack, and Trump was bragging about how the U.S. was a part of it, and then he walked it back, and then he went and bombed them. And not just the Trump administration, but for many years there has been other partners of the U.S. who have found themselves surprised that they change, including in Congo. Mobutu, the former dictator of Congo, he was one of the darlings of the U.S. and they turned on him. So the U.S. is not a reliable partner. That's one. Secondly, the M23 keeps claiming that they're not at the negotiating table, but the M23 is at the negotiating table because their leader is Rwanda's leader, Paul Kagame. That's who arms them, provides them all these logistical supports. They could not stand on their own had they not had the support of Rwanda, and Rwanda couldn't stand on its own had it not had the support of Western nations like the US and the UK and France and the European Union. And so all of these are things to take into account. Now, there is no history of the M23 disarming or even being, being disarmed and stopping the fight. What's happened in previous agreements is there's been amnesty, which is the problem with not having justice as part of the deal. And they allow former fighters to join the Congolese military, and they get away with the crimes that they committed. The other previous times, they've just been defeated, which was obviously a temporary defeat. They were defeated in 2013, partly because of sanctions on Rwanda by the international community, by many of their donors, and partly because of the International Force Brigade that came and flushed them out of the Congo. And they went into refugee camps in Uganda and Rwanda, regrouped, and came back almost 10 years and started fighting again. So we have no historical evidence to tell us that they will actually disarm or be disarmed. Rwanda doesn't show any, and Uganda, they don't show any willingness to actually disarm them or even disown them. They actually continue to supply them. And so it's going to be difficult unless the support is stopped and cut off completely to where they run out of their weaponry. I think it's going to be difficult to disarm them, but I also think they can be crippled by losing support of Rwanda and Uganda, which, again, I doubt that Rwanda and Uganda will do that, but if they lose that support, it could help.
Okay. Now, Christopher, let's dwell more on America's interest here. Now, U.S. doesn't seem bothered about this, all the issues going on around the killings, disarmaments in DR Congo. I mean, it looks as though it's just all about the rich mineral deposits that are waiting to be mined. And we all know that the West always wants what it wants. Does Congo have a choice here?
Well, look, apart from the points Dixon and Cloud made about the minerals, which you're also referring to, is the strong factor of Trump wanting to secure a peace deal by all means, because he's positioned himself as a deal maker, as a peacemaker. When he failed to resolve the Ukrainian crisis in, according to him, 24 hours, and then even the ceasefire that Israel broke in Gaza, an opportunity presented itself with the DRC, and he felt that he could, do something about that, and then still, get into this agenda of being able to secure peace in Africa. And it's a peace deal that also gives America access to the resources there. So when the president of the DRC signaled that they were willing to offer America their critical minerals for peace, he caught up with that, and that is the principal reason why Kagame agreed to be part of those discussions, because he could see, knowing Trump, that Trump could turn around and support the DRC against the Rwanda and the M23, and that would be really devastating for them. That's the reason why Kagame agreed to be part of this particular deal. And Cloud is right when he says that without Rwanda, there is no M23 per se, because so it's not correct that because M23 were not part of the discussion, therefore that makes it really risky. If Kagame acts in good faith and really pulls support from the M23, it will not be as effective as it has been. However, like I said, the M23 is only just one of the many rebel groups and factors and interests that are in the DRC. So we must have that in mind. However, apart from the photo op issue, opportunity for a photo op and saying that I've done a peace deal, which is Trump's major interest and the critical minerals, there are other advantages for the U.S. That has encouraged Trump's interest, and one of them would be, apart from the access to minerals, is countering the influence of China in the region, right? So that is something that they're looking to do to achieve by this. And then it will also be used to give the U.S. some diplomatic returns in terms of signaling U.S. strategic return to Africa. That the U.S. is a big player in Africa, so it was a good example, poster example for U.S. And then also in terms of risk management, using U.S. leverage and oversight mechanisms to try and solve this problem. So the U.S. has a lot of interest in it at the moment, and those interests coincide with the interests of someone like Kagame, and also, of course, the DRC president who made the offer of the access to the minerals in the first instance.
All right, Nixon, let's now look at how this affects the people. Now, according to the Africa Center for Strategic Studies, we understand that a lot of people actually died. We're talking about 500,000 people were displaced, about 3,000 people were killed. That was even as at February. Now, can DR Congo and the lives of its people be rebuilt? Because it doesn't seem to be the focus of America and Rwanda here.
Look, the the issue of humanitarian involvement in terms of alleviating the suffering of the Congolese people has never been the issue here. What we see here is rather what Isiki has mentioned, the access to minerals, the countering of China, but also those interests converging, as he correctly mentioned, with that of Rwanda. And you'd recall that Rwanda has some of the refineries that enable Rwanda to certify these minerals as Rwandan minerals, after all, despite knowing too well that they have been siphoned from the DRC at the expense of a humanitarian crisis that is currently occurring in Eastern DRC. And therefore, when you talk about the issue of humanitarian alleviation, a humanitarian issue when it comes to the suffering of the people, the killing, the children dying, unnecessarily in many of the situations that one cannot even stand to describe. And I can tell you that in 2000 and last year, actually, I was in Goma. I saw it by my own eyes in the camp of this place called Bulembo, where just 3 days before I arrived at the camp, 3 people had died for inhaling gas, because this is the area where Lake Kivu methane gas is often at risk of exploding at any given time. These are issues that do not come up when it comes to discussions. What discussions happen at a high level, they do not consider humanitarian issues at all. And I find that a problem. Why is it so? It's because Congo have a weak state. And when you have a weak state, which cannot look after its own people, these are the problems that are bound to happen, because the responsibility of looking after the citizen is the primary responsibility of the state, securing the borders of the country, and therefore making sure that the dispensation of social services and humanitarian relief access to every ordinary citizen of the country. Why is it? Because Congo perhaps lack the political strategic leadership to even lead that country. You have Tshisekedi signing this deal only for his own survival, because he saw the M23 advancing at the risk of toppling him out of power, and therefore he rushed to the US to offer what the US needed access to mineral resources for. So the issue of human being here does not matter anymore. What matters is the vested interest of those various players within this whole Congo war. On the other hand, you have Rwanda access to mineral resources, but also the control of Eastern Congo as its strategic tough when it comes to Rwanda's economic development. But on the other hand, the US have to access to mineral resources and countering China, of course. But on part of Tshisekedi, making sure that he sustained himself in power and making sure that he is the leader and he continue looting the resources of the country. Okay. As we know that there have been several allegations of corruption within the Tshisekedi government, both of which have not been tested in any case to make sure that the Congolese people get a fair share of their country's resources when it comes to stability and economic development.
All right.
And therefore making sure that they come out of this humanitarian crisis that they found themselves in.
All right, thank you so much, Nixon. So even as we round upon this, I'd like to quickly get Cloud's response. Now, it's been decades of pain, angst, and losses. Now, in about 2 minutes or so, what measures should be taken to address the humanitarian crisis, the crisis and the issues around governance, including the return and reintegration possibly of displaced persons and refugees?
Say the first one is to follow the UN resolution. Please correct me if I've got the number incorrect. It's 2776, if I'm not mistaken. or 2773 from February that says, that requests for Rwanda, that orders Rwandan troops to leave Congo with no preconditions. That's number one, because if the country is occupied, then people will not be able to go back, especially when the perpetrators who traumatized them are still there. That's number one. The second is, as I said before, there has to be some mechanism for reparations for the people who've been displaced, who've survived these atrocities. But in the meantime, at least once the occupation is, stop the occupation and then get the people back to their homes and get them to resettle in their homes while the long-term peace is being worked on through the justice process of justice that includes reparations and holding accountable the perpetrators.
All right, thank you so much. So in about 30 seconds, Christopher, your final thoughts on this.
Well, my final thoughts will be what I said was the fundamental problem, which I'm happy that Nixon also referred to, the question of the states. There must be social contracts that will enable people to believe in the state again. And secondly, we must also not forget that there's a real security concern for Rwanda in all of this, right? The fear. Kagame knows what he did in the 90s to take over Rwanda and govern it, and he knows that someone can do the same thing to him, and he will not definitely want to allow that to happen. So the security concern he has should be addressed, and I think it leads me to the question of unequal citizenship of Congolese, people that are referred to as Bayamulenge, for instance, who are not seen as real citizens or loyal patriotic citizens to the DRC because of their connections to DRC, to Rwanda, is something that Nixon speaks to about what the parameters of the state, what the states do for citizens, and allowing citizens to recognize the state as legitimate. Okay. I think that this is an important point to note in these discussions.
Thank you so much, Christopher Isike, Director, African Center for the Study of U.S., Claude Gatebuke, author on Rwandan genocide, civil war survivor, and of course, Nixon Katembo, analyst at Great Lake and East Africa. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts with us on the show. We appreciate that. Now, even as we wrap on this, the U.S. broker DRC Rwanda peace deal offers hope but faces challenges, excluding M23, ignoring past atrocities and focusing on mineral wealth raise questions and doubts about prioritizing justice and sovereignty. For lasting peace, a school of thought believes the deal needs strong enforcement, transparency, accountability in governance, and local inclusion if we hope to bring peace to the people of the DRC. Thank you so much for being part of today's edition of the show. You can now watch all our episodes on YouTube, and of course, Focal is at News Central. I am Lekon Obanjo. Enjoy the rest of your day.